Recently, I drafted who my first 20 hires would be if I were to build an accounting firm from scratch tomorrow. Today, I'm pulling in somebody that's built a firm to, I'm pretty sure, well over 100 people. What would they do from 0 to 20? Is it going to be different than mine? Almost certainly. Are there going to be some ideas that we can steal? I sure hope so. Otherwise, we'll never return to this format. So come on in. Today, Chad Davis is going to draft his first 20 hires. 3, 2, 1, sports. Okay, welcome, Chad.
Hey, Jason.
If you haven't met Chad before, Chad, what's the 30-second elevator pitch of Chad Davis?
Oh, I think isn't the claim to fame just becoming Jason Statt's friend a few years ago? I mean, that's what I look up to every day. I wake up, I look in the mirror.
All this out.
I'm just like, so happy to be friends with Mr. Stats. But yes, to be honest, like I really don't want to spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about our friendship, but I think we probably should talk about the 30 seconds. So I have a firm in Canada called LiveCA LLP. Jason and I did a podcast called Automation Town. There's 3 seasons of that. Was really fun.
Sure did. And
then spending
Rest in
free
peace.
time. Yes, that's right. And then any free time has been spent playing around with tech and automation. And inside of Realize, we do a monthly session kind of showcasing what everybody's been building in that sort of automation world. So that's kind of where I've been spending my free time over the last couple of years. Thank you for the opportunity to draft our first 20 people.
Yeah, so if I recall, when we've talked before, you removed yourself from the doing of the work pretty quick. I would say quicker than most accountants probably would. Do you identify as like that entrepreneurial type of mindset? Like not the manager, the technician, more entrepreneurial?
No, I think early days you kind of have to be, I guess, depending on your bank account situation and how quickly you can give it to other people and generate more to give to other people. But I think, yes, I'd like to provide opportunities for other accountants in the space. And by having a CPA firm, that opportunity exists for those people. So yes, I'd like that to keep happening. I think that's why LiveCA developed the way it did, was because it was very pro everyone else and not so pro just 1 or 2 owners.
Okay, so if you were to throw out this monolith that you've built, that might not have been the right word.
Can we just call out that we're no longer above 100? Like, we actually went down back to 60 people. And that is the fun part about this, is that there's ebbs and flows of every firm, and you're not defined by your head count or the cool tech that you use or how many episodes of Jason Daly you listen to on a weekly basis. But you're there, and you are who you are in the moment. And there's always like just seasons of running a firm. So the current season that we're in is one of peace and calmness and not trying to chase this shiny thing. And we've actually like reduced the number of services that we've been offering to people and have cut out things like CFO services and automation and tech builds, customer training. All that stuff is now gone. And we're just focusing on the things that we really enjoy doing and that people enjoy paying us for.
Okay, so with the context that you built a big firm and then tanked it and stripped out a bunch of other things, if anyone still wants to listen to your advice, what, like, how would you approach this firm you're about to draft? Is this like, I assume you're solo owner here. When you launched your other one, you had a partner. In this draft, you're solo owner.
Oh,
is this like,
that's no fun.
Going to be Chad's? Oh, I mean, unless you don't want it to be.
No, it can be. It's fine. It's fine, Jason. Just excluding the biggest part of my business journey, my business partner. Wouldn't it be fun to say we had a partner and they had these skills? So there's other people that might have partners and skills.
No, I think it's unlikely that someone will have a partner with the exact same skills as your hypothetical partner.
That's true. My business partner has the exact opposite skills of me, which is why it worked out. I think if we had similar skills, we probably wouldn't work out very well. But that's a discussion for another time, probably.
Okay, we're going to dial this up to hard mode for you, and you're going to have to figure it out yourself this time.
Fine.
For this firm, if you were to do this tomorrow, is this like a fast growth firm? Is this like a lifestyle? I want to go play with my poodle, like sort of firm? What does this look like?
I think if I had to build it again, knowing what I know now, I would mimic the growth at the same clip that I was sure about the interest in what we were selling. So kind of matching the market's interest in what we're doing to fulfilling that. So in the beginning, we ended up taking out some money as a loan to be able to hire the first 4 or 5 people within the first few months. And that was really great because we could say, okay, we needed a cloud accountant or a bookkeeper or a tax person. And they all kind of grew up together. And I think that was our original unfair advantage, was that we kind of started with 4 or 5 people over
Oh,
6
wow.
months. And that allowed us to just leapfrog and go really fast. But if I didn't want to take out the loan and just use the profits, I think that's more responsible, maybe. And I think that's probably what I would do this time, is just use the money and reinvest it and just be really sure about what it was I was building, because we've gone in way different directions over the years. Some have required a large headcount, and some just focused on the wrong things. So I think that's what I would come at it like 12 years later. I would focus on what's working and just grow not as a lifestyle business where it's just me and another person or a few people that are benefiting, but with the goal that we get up to 20 to 40 to 50 people, because that's when you really start seeing the economies of scale of things working out well and having coverage, having training materials, giving people opportunities. So I'm glad you picked 20, because I think the first 5 are pretty generic or pretty similar across most firms. But 20 is an interesting one because it does set yourself up for what those next 10 to 20 people are focusing on.
Okay, so pick 0 is you. Assume you're doing some work, you got some cash going. Where are you starting? What's your very first hire? Is this just like a staff level accountant? What are you going to go with?
So if it's me, I'm not a tax CPA, so I would want to serve the tax piece. And because that's not a skill set that I have, I would want it to be quite senior. I don't think it could be as senior as possible, because those people typically won't move to a dude living in his RV, traveling around saying yes.
As they shouldn't.
As they should not. So I think the first hire would be it's like a senior tax accountant.
Okay.
Just somebody with a few years of experience that can file the returns and know what they're looking for, so that when you answer the question, what do you do? It can be a back office plus tax. To me, that's an interesting offering.
So this is brave. So I can tell you the blocker, a lot of bookkeepers are going to have like coming out, opening maybe their bookkeeping shop is what they thought it was going to be. How do you trust the technical capability of that thing that you are incapable of reviewing, right? Like most small firm owners start being the expert in everything. Is this something that like maybe you are wired differently just from the beginning to be able to do that? Because I think that's probably most people's biggest blocker.
Yeah, I mean, the question was posed like through the lens of you are starting, you're the person. So for me, I know that I'd want to build a firm that has tax involved. So the review portion of that does carry some risk. So I'd make sure I had some really great insurance for that kind of thing. But also, I'd probably find a resource. Now, this is the hard part, because after 12 years, you have a network of people that you know that you can kind of dial into. If you're just starting out, you don't necessarily have that network. So I would work towards having another person. Then this is why the second hire is going to surprise you probably. It would be another tax person.
More?
Yes. And you're like, this is exactly the reason where people can like, is there a hang up button on the podcast? Because they probably would say like 2 tax people. Why would you ever do that?
They hit it a while ago.
I know. I think it's because that's the vision of the firm, which is like books and tax. So if I can keep the other side of the technology and the books and getting things ready for those tax people, there's a little bit less of a risk that the tax is going to be incredibly suboptimal or subpar. Because you have 2 people working together, they're better at research.
That's a very good point.
They have access to different tax research tools that apparently work. But yeah, eventually you have to like have some sort of trust in that process and going. And that's how I would do it. I know it's a really probably out of left field answer, but I think it sets me up for future growth without having to not offer the service. Because in my experience, bookkeeping plus tax tends, at least in Canada, to gather the attention of companies with bigger pockets. And
Mm.
that's who I would go after.
It is for sure a thing in the US as well. Is this a more of a junior level tax person, you think, to support the senior you already have?
Yep, it is. And I think
Okay.
down the road, that's when you start thinking about the tax manager, and if these people that got you from, A to B are equipped to be in that sort of next version of what the firm looks like. And who knows, they may want to start something on their own. They may not want to be part of building this up again. It might have been a horrible experience because they have to work for me. Who knows?
You alluded to going after bigger fish. What is the kind of the avatar of the client you're going after then?
Yeah, our avatar hasn't changed very much in a decade. I'd say in the first few years, it definitely was changing, but it very quickly morphed into sort of that $1 million plus business that needed a lot more support and could stomach paying a couple $1,000 a month minimum for some of these services. Over time, it's now probably doubled in terms of the minimum and a little bit bigger on the other side. But we've been able to do it using Xero for the last 10 years. And we just recently launched our QuickBooks division this July. So it's totally possible to do it with those two tools.
Most folks, when they're starting out, they assume they're just going to be bottom feeding, right? Like they're taking all the little projects. I don't know, what gave you the confidence, or how did you build the network? How did you get into those bigger fish type of clients when sometimes we can assume if we are a little shop that maybe they're not going to be impressed by a little shop?
I think the social capital marketing works really well. Logos are one thing, but also like talking about those relationships when you're out speaking to potential clients. If you can show proof that you've helped somebody like them, it is really great. And we were very, very blessed with the opportunity to work with almost like the betterment of Canada called Wealthsimple. And that launched us so hard into the tech space that people are like, wait a minute, this company's using this company. Who are they and how can they handle this? And then that relationship lasted years and they hired internally, and we're like, wait a minute, it's actually pretty fun to transition companies that are growing into having an internal finance department. Like, which other accounting firms are focusing on that? And the short answer was like very few, if not any. And we're like, no, let's be that firm. We don't want them to be clients forever. They can if they want, but our shtick is going to be a full finance team for less than the price of a full-time hire. And then during the sales process, it's about transitioning and building out their teams.
Interesting. Okay. So you had an early anchor client, and that ended up opening a bunch of other doors.
Yep. And I think just the amount of smaller clients at the same time that were like in that industry, it was an onslaught. So we had a really great logo page.
Okay. You're working your keister off at this point. You got 2 tax people. You're doing all the books yourself.
Yeah.
What's number 3 looking like?
Number 3 and 4, hiring at the same time, would be a bookkeeper and a bookkeeper / a staff accountant. I know it's a weird word to use, staff. I know it's like a faux pas in a lot of things. So an employee, named a bookkeeper or a staff accountant, just somebody that could essentially do some bookkeeping, but also prep it up for the tax team.
So are both of those like basically the same person, a staff level bookkeeper, accountant, whatever you want to call them?
Yep, I think it has to be.
Okay.
For me anyway, because at this point in your firm, you really don't know all your procedures. You're still figuring out your tech stack. You're not sure, even if you're using a project management system yet. Hopefully you are, but you might not be. So you've got all this other stuff. And if we can free up my time, I guess we're talking about me specifically here, to start working on some of that stuff now that we have some traction and some money coming in, those other 2 people can start working, and you've got almost like the remnants of a little team that's starting, and you can kind of figure what's working and what's not, because regardless of how much you want to be role-based in the beginning, it really is important to hitch yourself to the right people. Like, those people in the early days are gonna, I won't say make or break, but they'll play a big factor in the success rate. So again, they may not be there the end of the next year, but for those first 2 years or the first year, a lot of the development happens as that person puts their mark on those roles.
At this point, are you managing all the client relationships? If you now have 2 staff accountants and 2 tax folks, are you stepping out of that at all yet?
Yeah. And I think at that point where you're at like 4 people, you probably have the tax manager or the person that's heading up the tax starting to lead some of these, because this is where, as a firm, you start to create your identity of what does a monthly package look like? Am I doing things, more than once a month? Is it a quarterly package? Like, what do you actually want to sell? And getting feedback from those people around what types of things your clients are asking for and working for. Like, we didn't know when we first started what people wanted to buy or what we could even offer. So leaning into that pretty quickly so that you're not the only person thinking about what to sell and what to offer is a pretty magical thing.
Do you have trepidation in that transition? Because a lot of people, you're framing it as what do they want and what do they need? But a lot of folks just get stuck on they want Chad or they want Tina or they want Chuck. Like, I don't know, any trepidation in that kind of mindset shift?
No. And here's why. Early days, I mean, it literally feels like life and death. You're looking after every dollar. You're trying to appease every single relationship. And I think if we take this from the lens of like what it looks like 10 or 12 years later, and some people have even 20, 30, 40 years later, you recognize that it's really important to build up the core offering and it's less about you delivering on that service. And if someone wants you, you probably did an inadequate job of selling your service. Possibly. I know that's a weird statement to say, but if you're essentially training and educating people from the minute they come in the door. So if you educate and train them that they're going to get better service from their team, there's a higher chance that they won't want you. And again, customers that have been with you in the very beginning, chances are you're going to change as you go from 0 people to 5 people to 20 people. And maybe they may not be a fit for what you're looking for anyway. So focusing on that core service offering and education through selling probably has a higher success rate than trying to appease the I want Chuck, Tina people.
Yeah. So say you have somebody like a Betterment. Are you keeping your fingers in a relationship like that longer than the others?
I think you have to until you hire that first client service lead. I think you have to if it's that big of a client. And this is your gas money, your diesel fuel, Jason, for traveling across the country. You need to.
Let's keep going through your draft picks because I just Googled client service lead and I'm not sure what that is. So what would number 5 be?
So under number 5, I would pick. Okay, so we call it like a client service manager. So
okay,
a client service manager for our firm is a CPA who isn't necessarily a tax expert, but they know tax. They're not a bookkeeping expert, but they know bookkeeping. But they're very good at managing expectations, delivering financial advice and packages, can speak to every accounting sort of issue and be the main point of contact for a customer. So then I would kind of switch my responsibilities of being that main point at this point over to a client service manager. And the reason why I think at 5 people you could attract somebody like this is because there's a lot of CPAs who are like maybe stuck on a trajectory or they know exactly where they're going to be, but the management section of their career, maybe they haven't ticked that box yet. So this is a really great opportunity for somebody to come in and start being a client service manager versus, working and doing the majority of the tick and bopping work that they might have been doing at another firm. So we almost had no problem staffing up for these in the early days. There was a lot of people that wanted to say, yes, I'm ready to take on a relationship role.
Because you described what that is, and my mind immediately went to, I've never known such a CPA who can definitely handle relationships, but is bad at all the technical things. But that's really interesting. Were they coming from other firms primarily?
Yeah. Our first one actually came from industry. She was working for, I want to say like Sears Roebuck or something like that, like before it went under. The next one came from a Big 8 firm, right? Somebody who just kind of maybe knew their trajectory and saw that this was there. Another one, came from smaller firms, like I would say regional firms, not necessarily Big 4 and not necessarily the small 5 or 10 person firm, but like the 25 to 85 person firm.
Interesting. This episode is sponsored in part by Team Up. What if you went out and you hired an offshore person and they took some sensitive information? They did some bad with it. They stole. Oh, worst case scenario, right? How do you manage that? So, to start, some advice from Team Up here. According to Team Up, the number one and number two mistakes accountants make. Number one, thinking of your overseas teammates as, quote, offshore staff. Thinking of them as something else rather than just an extension of our team that is subject to the same rules and restrictions and controls as anybody else that I hire, whether they're onshore or offshore. Mistake number two, making global teams more complicated than they really are. The three things Team Up always says: one, it's just people. Two, build relationships of trust over time. And three, what would you do if you hired in Arizona? Wow, why the heat for Arizona? Not, Florida or something like that. You hire somebody in Arizona, you probably don't stay up all night worrying about them, right? And the same should be true with your team in the Philippines. Hire the right people, get to know them personally, and give access to non-sensitive info first. I feel like there's more a question of internal controls, like we are accountants, so we don't really rely on trust so much, right? We don't just fling open the keys of the castle for anybody to come get it. That's not in the ad copy, that's my take. If somebody in the Philippines is gonna steal from me, it's because I put them in that position, just like if I hired anybody across the country. Instead, focus on the positive. Don't get too wrapped up in fear and scarcity. Be logical about thinking through those problems and coming up with solutions for them to protect yourself not only from offshore hires, but the rest of your team as well. A little more about Team Up, check out the link in the show notes. Thank you to Team Up for sponsoring this episode. This episode is sponsored in part by Client Hub. There is no bigger software decision your firm will make than what practice management system you should use. But when it comes to picking a PM, here's a way to think about it. Use the 4 C's: capabilities, client experience, clarity, and community. Last week, we talked about capabilities. I also shared a fun anecdote about how I bought my wife's wedding ring. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about client experience. If you saw the 5-minute demo day I did on my YouTube channel about Client Hub, you know Client Hub is built around being a collaborative sort of two-sided task management platform where you got your tasks, the client's got their tasks. The experience looks pretty much the same. But rather than having your own killer internal set of tasks and then bodging something together to send to the client or giving them an email, they're kind of just in there working with you. Like the client does in their own business, in their own task management system. Because the reason most firms get stuck has nothing to do with your firm stuff. It has everything to do with how efficiently you're exchanging information with your clients. And this is why a practice management system with the client experience at its core, not some janky bolted on portal that's an afterthought. It's why that client workflow at its core is what will make your firm more productive. You know how to get your work done. You don't know how to get Steve to get you the gosh darn thing that you'd asked for 18 times, right? Sidebar, maybe my favorite thing from that demo day we did, they've got this dashboard. That's just a dashboard of all the clients you've asked for stuff from and how long you've been waiting for those things, all in a single view. You can literally print it out, shoot darts at it, but there's a mass remind button. I don't know if I've seen anybody else visualize all the clients you're waiting on stuff from in one place like that. It's pretty cool. Anyways, that's Client Hub. To learn more, check out the link in the video description. Okay, so we got a CSM now, 2 staff level accountants, a junior and a senior tax. Are you thinking about pods or any sort of structure at all at this point, or is this just a free for all?
No, so now that you have your 2 tax people and you have your manager who's overseeing the relationship, and you've got the 2 bookkeepers / staff accountants, this is where you kind of have to start to think, okay, what direction are we taking the firm, right? Because at this point, remember, there's nothing for sales. There's really nothing for ops, not a lot for technology so far. That's kind of living on my heels right now. And you probably have to start thinking about this stuff in a little bit more serious way before stuff starts hitting the fan. So this next hire, I would pick, we'll call it a sales admin. But really, I think what they're doing is being my right-hand person to do all the initial intake for any of the sales work. They're coordinating the proposals and working out the details with me, who will be the closer. And then they'll be managing the onboarding and the sales component and a bit of administration as it relates to setting up that first infrastructure of tech and ops.
Are they doing any of the technical aspects of onboarding, or is that going to the staff account and the tax pros?
No, I think this is where it starts to stay with them, where they're going to start doing some of the technical things. Now, one of the things that we did early on I won't say it's a mistake because you always learn from what you do, but we had those, we called them onboarders, doing the technical conversions from one system to another. And it always raised issues. It's like you're taking non-accountants to do accounting work. So
Mm.
you'd probably, in this circumstance, do all of the admin pieces. And then when it came to the technical things like switching from desktop to online or from one large system to a smaller system or something, you could craft out those procedures and then have the staff accountants who are kind of working underneath the client service manager to start helping develop those procedures, knowing that as the firm gets bigger, that gets broken out and different people are doing that work.
Okay, so we have got 2 tax folks, 2 accounting folks, a client service manager, and a sales admin. Closing in on 10. 7, 8, 9, 10. What are we looking at next? And give me a glimpse into like any sort of structure that's starting to develop to all of that.
Good. So you can start to see that we're going to have our first team essentially here, which is a client service manager. You've got 2 people doing the work, right? And they've probably started to switch off, where one is more of the staff accountant, the person, the associate kind of working with that manager, prepping up some of the work. And then you've got like the bookkeeper. So inevitably the bookkeeper will run out of capacity the quickest as you bring on new customers, because now you have the salesperson here. So going back and like fortifying that team a bit with another bookkeeper is my next pick.
Wow. These are big pods. This is all still one squad here?
It is.
One platoon?
It is. And I think there's a very specific reason for this. One is we didn't really find our tech voice for years. It was all kind of over the place. And the operations and the procedures that you develop are very much based on experience. So if you first hire a tech person, you're going to have that resource to kind of work through, but it's going to be pretty expensive. So using that lens of slower growth through profit, and then actually being able to stand by your claims when you're talking to potential employees to say, this actually is a calm place, right? Here's our financials. Here's the growth. Here's how we think about hiring. And when you have a supportive mindset to the people around you, I think that goes further than saying, oh, we have a tech person that's going to make your job easier. Or we have a marketing person or an HR person to help support at this age. We're under 10 people right now. So we have to think about slower, more, not deterministic, but just more very, what's the word? Thoughtful growth? I don't know. There's way better words that I can't think of right now, but just something that isn't erratic, which I think a lot of people go through when they're either chasing sales to pay for that person that they've just come in through the door, or they're thinking maybe I shouldn't have hired that person and now you have to let somebody go because you won't be able to pay for them for 3 or 4 months because you lost a bunch of clients.
Yeah, and the big issue with this exercise is we're assuming everybody works out. And whenever you do go through something like this, you're going to have overachievers and underachievers, and overachievers that you need to challenge with new stuff. And somebody that says, that job over there actually looks more fun. Could I do some of that? But we're kind of just glossing over all that.
It is. And that, just to go back, like that's why hiring 2 of the bookkeeper and staff accountant at the same time, super important. That's why the senior tax person and the regular tax person were the first 2 hires, because inevitably one of them won't work out, whether they don't want it to work out or you don't want it to work out. So having a standstill is really tough. And I think we've all been to that place where we don't want to be in a standstill.
Okay, so 2-ply approach on hiring. Who you got for 8, 9, 10?
So this isn't all written down. There's no notes here. So this is just kind of thinking off the top of the head. This is where I'd spend some money on. Okay, so we've already said that we would hire another bookkeeper or 2, right? So now we're
at 7 was a staff account. You got 3. Do you want another one?
Yeah. Oh, at this point, I'd like to have 2 bookkeepers, 2 staff accountants, and a client lead. So that's 5.
Okay.
The 2 tax people is 7, and then the sales admin is 8. So now that you have this team, the next phase of growth is really interesting. This is why hindsight's kind of interesting, because we broke out our bookkeeping from payroll and bill pay. But for the first few hires, they kind of have to do everything. So here's the weird part. Payroll has been one of the stickiest services that we've offered. People are very happy about it. And it's because there's not a lot of firms that will take the complicated payroll work. They'll send it to a payroll specialist. And again, payroll in Canada is very different than payroll in the US. This might be out of context a bit, but the same level of responsibilities there. There's letters, there's penalties. You have to do things by a certain deadline. There's annual requirements. There's a lot of unnecessary, oversight and overreach into data that people just don't need, but we have to do anyway. So this is where I would break out payroll, and I'd start to lean into a service that I know will help in the next phase of growth, because we can offer a specialized payroll service without limiting ourselves. So the next two are payroll. Someone to manage
Two,
it,
wow.
someone to manage it, and someone to do the work. Well, they're both going to be doing the work, but someone with more experience and another one to actually go through the majority of the work. That also frees up time from the bookkeeper. So you've just created a massive amount of capacity that from people that were doing payroll that might not have been their specialty. And now you can take on a couple more clients to help pay for those 2 new payroll people. And you're starting with your most profitable and sticky service that you're starting to break out.
Will you do just payroll for people, or do you have to take their accounting and tax work too?
This is where hindsight is coming in. I would do just payroll as long as you are getting paid for the other elements that are required with payroll. Like there's inevitably going to be tax and accounting questions that go through the manager. There's going to be some admin around paperwork and filings and access to things. So that's why having different components as part of the price is important. So you're not just saying it's just the payroll people that you're working with and paying for.
And are you taking that because it's worthwhile to just take just that, or because you think they'll convert to more?
I've learned that capacity is when you have it, it's okay to take work like this. And then as you're nearing capacity, then you can start to be more specific about how you want to use your remaining pieces of capacity hours. So whether that's only clients that you think will turn into more, or it's adding more capacity. I know this is the exercise is the first 20 hires, but I mean, if you've built an 11-person firm just with this structure and it works and it's delivering a really great profit and there's not a lot of risk, that could be great. And you don't need to get bigger. So this is why I'm a little hesitant now to add people just for the sake of adding people, because the overarching business model is really what you're trying to build and protect.
What does 10 to 20 look like if we're in kind of that weird limbo bridge, get to the next thing?
Cool. So right at this level, I would, is this part of the rules? Because I wouldn't hire an HR dedicated resource at this point, but I would have a nice HRIS, and I would have hired an HR outsourcing company.
Outsource like fractional stuff. That's all. Mm-hmm. We treat that as a hire.
Yeah. Now, all of the hires to date that we've talked about have all been onshore and not offshore.
Okay.
One of the kind of tenets that we've grown our firm on is that we would not offshore any of the work. And that's a decision we've made. It's not the right or wrong decision. It's just the decision that we've made. So outsourcing the HR piece is to level up really quickly with experts. They'll already have documentation. They'll see our holes. They'll help with hiring, and eventually they'll help place the right person in that role with you. And we've done this at our firm, and outsourced to a really great organization, and they helped us find our person who has led us all the way through. So highly recommend that, starting with a pro versus starting with a full-time hire that may or may not work out.
And they're going to be helping you with recruiting as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Here's where we get into setting the stage, because at this point you'll know if you want to grow or not. And if things are working and people are paying and you've got a sales kind of little engine with you and the other person pushing this thing through, with those assumptions in place, the next hire I would have is someone who is almost not part of an accounting background, but they're incredibly detail oriented and organized, and they have a high tenet of accountability to lead the operations of the firm at this stage. So call it an operations manager.
What does that mean?
So to me,
why do operations need to be led?
To me, it means that you're finally taking that step into a little bit more of a maturehood. You're going to be able to, I won't say crystallize, but you're going to be able to set up and do a lot of work in a project management system. You're going to take the learnings of the last 8 to 15 months of what the firm is good and bad at and where the holes are. They're going to be great at interviewing and just finding issues. They're going to look at how communication is handled They're going to look at the sales process. They're just going to kind of be that person that asks the questions from a unifying perspective. And again, this person may not be with you in this role for more than a year or two, because they're essentially taking you from nothing beans to semi-organized. And then that's only going to get better and better. But having a non-accountant come in who has no bias to how public firms work or any other firms work is great. Now, if they were an ops person at another firm, there's a risk that they put in the exact same thing that is work, but it works for them. Maybe they were super high growth and well-funded and didn't care about like the profit piece. So I think just making sure that you have alignment on where you're taking the company and what type of business model you're running, and then having them put as much effort into the right things so that you can grow sustainably. I think they would pick things around like really great communication and a nice package that people can, refer to their friends and say, look what I get every month. It's very helpful. All those.
And that's a full-time hire, not a fractional.
No, I'd go
contract?
I'd go full-time, because the amount of questions that they're going to have to ask and learn about on how things work, it's a lot of time.
If I've never hired somebody like that, like where do you even look for that sort of person?
Don't know. I think if you're very clear that this is I really want someone who's organized and accountable, and they see things through to the end and they ask the hard questions. That's what I'm hiring off of, not necessarily their experience or that kind of stuff. I actually don't know how much I'd pay for them, because I wouldn't know where the revenue is in the business, but I wouldn't overpay just to set up the right amount of structure, because the structure is always going to change. But I would pay enough where they would be motivated to make all these changes. And at the bare minimum, they've got a great resume for what they've did the last year or two for a step-up job, or they become one with the job and just want to keep leveling up here for the next couple of years.
Yeah, interesting.
Normally when people say interesting, they're like, you're an idiot. Here's what I think.
No, that's why I said interesting.
Yeah.
No, most people have never made a hire like that. In fact, it's like overcoming kind of the small business owner limitations. It is, well, why can't that be a thing I would do? Like in that case, why would you not do that job, Chad? What jobs are you doing instead of that? Because I think most people will say like, oh, this is where I can really contribute.
For me personally, it's been in the closer position. It's like, I would like to make sure that the people that are coming into the organization have very clear expectations, that they know that if they're coming in, they have their answers. Like they have the confidence, they have salespeople can absolutely do this. But I've just found that founder-led closing has a huge upside for small companies and small firms. Now, there's other firms that have grown with full sales teams and done incredibly well. There's no right or wrong way. But I think at this stage, if you're building a slow growth kind of right type of clients thing, and there's no extra money going towards, I won't say inflated sales targets and commissions and things, I'd rather keep that money and do that work, and then put the money into supporting the people that have invested in you in the early days so that they have opportunities down the road.
This episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. Boy, if you've been around this podcast, you know we have run a lot of LiveFlow ad reads. You cut this podcast ad feed and it bleeds LiveFlow ad read. In fact, you know what we should do? Hang on. I had a whole ad read for this, but I just got a better idea. You know what we should do? You know how we made that JSON bot that's like connected to all the podcast episodes, and you can ask it questions and it'll go across 280 episodes and give you answers? Let's make a bot that's just all my LiveFlow ad reads, and then I can just ask it questions. I have this workflow problem. How could LiveFlow help me? I just burned a bunch of money on a reporting platform. Is this something that LiveFlow could have done for me instead in a spreadsheet, because that's where I'm actually happy and comfortable? What's the easiest way to connect my spreadsheets to my client's QuickBooks data in a single click? And the chat assistant would be like, LiveFlow. No, it wouldn't. It would be like, oh man, I hear you. Oh, that's a real tough situation you got yourself there. Here's what you're gonna do. And it'd be like a 2-paragraph long way of just saying LiveFlow. Could be good content though. We should put something useful in this ad read. LiveFlow, it's the easiest way to liberate data from those client QuickBooks files. Whether you're in Excel, Google Sheets, You get a little live flow button. It's like an extension. You click that guy, and you can run all your favorite QuickBooks reports, sync that data into QuickBooks, like a one-time sync or an ongoing, like rolling sync. Do like some kind of real-time reporting stuff. Great way to get data out to stakeholders who you don't want to have access to the QuickBooks files. Also, be it a banker, an advisor, employees of the business, quite possibly even the business owner themselves, because they keep breaking things. That is live flow. To learn more about that one, check out the link in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Stanford Tax. And I'm sorry if I sound upset today or a little emotional. I just got the news that we lost someone that was very near and dear to all of us. If you came of age in this profession doing tax work, Stanford Tax, they just killed the paper organizer. You know, the paper organizer, you print out your tax software and you send it out to your clients. It's big and it's dumb and it doesn't make any sense, and I ask them a bunch of pointless questions. But it's dead and it's never coming back. Okay? Stanford Tax, it gives you a modern way to gather the same information using pro forma info from your tax software. Like, it will actually intelligently ask the questions that need to be asked, taking into account that pro forma data, so that on January 3rd every year, you aren't cleaning out the local Staples, printing out umpteen reams of paper organizers, only to mail them to your clients and never get them back. We did a demo day of Stanford Tax on my YouTube channel where you can see how it works in 5 minutes. If you're still using paper organizers, please stop. Please just stop it. I know you're still working on extended 1040s. Man, this is the time to be kicking the tires on new tax tools so you're not going in blind to next tax season. So you know exactly what you're working with and what'll work and what won't work. So by the time you get to next January, you are absolutely humming, okay? If you do tax stuff, check this one out, Stanford Tax. I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, we're on hire. That was 12. No, that was 12. We're on hire 13 now. How you getting us to 20?
So you're either promoting that first staff accountant and replacing them to run the second team, or you're hiring a person that is at the same level or so as the existing client service manager. Because you need to start that second one up, because there's too much risk in only having one person as a client lead at this point. You're big enough. You got 10 or 12 or 13 people. Hopefully that's between $1 and $2.5 million in revenue somewhere. You need more leads.
Okay. So is that person like spinning out part of the other team, or are they just doing double duty on that one team?
I don't know, but I think after this long, I would say there's a really good opportunity for you to take somebody that's been with you for 2 years and bring them into leading their own team. And then you hire a couple. So if that person was let's choose promotion. So we promote that person over, which means now there's only one kind of associate / staff accountant role in the first team. The second team's missing somebody, and they're also missing some bookkeepers. So I'd fill those out, and I would not do the shuffle that you're really tempted to do, because there is just something inherent about like working with the same people and not switching teams all the time. If you can avoid it, and if you've got a nice like pipeline, cool. But maybe that person takes a few of the relationships that they were leading anyway, or that they were doing. Call it 5 or 10 relationships, maybe 5. That way they can get started, and then the bookkeepers can train the new bookkeepers. The new associate that comes on board after this to be able to work with that person can be mentored by the person that actually worked with them. And then you can start, you've already created room. You've gotten rid of essentially 5 from that first team. So you can put a new client into the new team, the next new client in the other one, the next one. You can just kind of flip flop back and forth for a little bit. And then eventually you can start filling up that second team.
Okay. And you're making some tax hires in the second team too, I imagine?
No. So this is why I hired the first 2 tax people, because they're essentially doing tax for everybody on a high level.
Okay.
Right. So 2 people should be able to handle 2, call it pods of tax work. Should be, depending. Not all people will buy tax from you. Some will, some won't. So I think at this point, I mean, we've said we would hire a couple more. So where are we at now? Like 16, 17 people?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. This is where you would hire like a junior tax preparer. Because remember, the other 2 are pretty senior-ish. They weren't tax manager level, but they were taxes. So the reason I would do junior is because the tax managers that kind of exist in the market en masse, I think are used to managing larger teams. And if you first initially hired somebody to be able to create the team and put their stamp on it, you won't have the exposure that these large tax managers will have when they have a team of 10 tax people below them. So if you're at a point now where you're at 20 people and you're doing, I don't know, 3 or 4 million bucks in revenue, or 3 million or something, you probably can put a couple, like an extra $20,000 or $40,000 towards a really great tax hire, so it reduces the overall risk of any tax mistakes, but also gives those two tax people that have been doing the majority of the work someone to level up their skills with. That's a weird word, but like, and you might lose a person because they didn't get the promotion, but you're setting that structure, and that's okay, right? The structure is really what you're after those first 15 people or so.
So you've got these tax folks on the side. Are clients just interacting with the CSM? Is it the CSM and the tax person? What's that look like?
Yeah, I think you bring the tax person in on tax related meeting stuff, and maybe they're there for maybe like a mid-year check-in for estimates and that kind of work. But it's all into what you sell, right? We didn't spend a lot of time talking about like, what is the firm selling? What are the services you're doing? But assume that it's back office work, payroll, bookkeeping, AP, tax, and controllership work. Nothing CFO, nothing techie with automations, nothing obscure like tax credits or something like this that are like a big thing to work on, or cross-border stuff. Just very vanilla, straightforward stuff.
Is the accountant getting pulled in on these meetings too, or is the CSM stepping in more for them than they would the tax folks?
I think including them on the meetings is valuable, because really they're there to learn, right? They want to see, they want to do the summary emails with AI just as much as everybody else does. So yeah, I would include them, because they will eventually be the ones that might lead this client down the road. You never know. Just like you're breaking off into different teams, how that breaks off is different for every customer, or for every type of firm that's building this out. But it's not to say pods are the right answer either. Like for the first 20 employees, I think they're a fantastic way that people, because you only have a couple. For reference, we ended up cutting our pods at about the 70-80 person mark. And then we went to sort of shared services, where there's a manager and then 2 associates, and then they get to use all of the other services that are being sold.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's way down the road, but in the beginning, I think pods would be great. I'd probably do it until there's 3 or 4 really great running pods, and then you figure out like how that affects your business model and future growth and replaceability and education and training, and where people will insert themselves into your firm, right? Will they always come in as bookkeepers and work their way up? Will they be CPA students and start there and work their way up? Like, I found that having insertion points sort of for different positions has been a lot easier than trying to hire the really high level person.
We talk about offshore quite a bit on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The first comment's going to be, why not offshore?
So for me personally, I've seen offshoring work beautifully for a lot of people. We had a pretty bad situation with it when we tried it, so we're a little bit scarred. But I would say that like we're on the other side of all of that sort of stuff now, and I can see the calmness in everybody's eyes when you can explicitly say like, no, we're not building a firm that is built around outsourcing. Now, is that the reason you should or shouldn't do it? I don't know. It's your company, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that you're thinking through. And as much as we had good intentions with outsourcing and then having the onshore team review / do more higher level work, we couldn't pull it off. Just didn't work that well. So I think in another world and another offshore, another way of approaching this, it could be very different. But I think just the fact that a lot of people went through this, and like we're really here for them, and the stability of this in this like world where there's so much things changing, I'm okay, and I'm actually kind of I'm excited to say that we're not outsourcing, and it's right on the front of our website. It's like, hey, we're 100% Canadian and we're not outsourcing. And the amount of people that have gone through our sales process that have said, you know what, it was really refreshing. Like I knew exactly where you stood. There was no like, are you or aren't you? And you're the only firm that we've talked to out of all like the online firms that has had a stance like this. So like, It's like, we're good. So it's like, again, there's nothing that's right or wrong. It's just what it is. And who knows what it looks like in 5 years, but I think you have to lean into what's working. And I love having a slow growth, calm company that knows what they're doing, and we've got a path. And honestly, if it was outsourcing, it was working well, I'd still feel as good. But we're right now, that was the decision we made.
I mean, it's a great example too of where having something to say and having a stance is like better than just wallowing and not having one.
Yep.
Especially if you're putting that on your landing page. Like you're going to attract the folks for whom they're like, oh, cool. Like I appreciate this. Like this aligns with how I run my business too.
Yeah, and look, there's no doubt that outsourcing works really well for a lot of accounting firms, and it should, right? It's ripe for it. There's not much more to say other than like I think we'll be also able to lean into tech advances really well. Like we're positioned really well, and I think people that are like that outsource a lot, they'll also probably be positioned pretty well if they've got a pretty good operational like point of contact, and like that's how they think. I think the ones that might be a little bit hard is if they think that just by hiring an outsourcer, it's going to fix all the problems. Like that, you've probably done tons of episodes on pros and cons of outsourcing and how people do it, and it takes a lot of work. But if you do it right,
Yeah.
lots of upside.
Okay. Any I don't know, any glaring omissions in this squad that you've built? Final thoughts?
Well, yeah, like we didn't really talk about like the tech piece, marketing and sales, like what a second version of the ops person looks like, tech specialists and that kind of thing. I'd kind of group those all into, okay, if we're at around 20 people right now, we have to decide like where is our best and most effective use of our money right now to one, protect the calm lives of the people that have signed up to be in a kind of calm workplace. And two, like what are we leaving on the table? So I love the idea of having a tech specialist because we've always had them since day one. That was like one of our first hires. And it really helped us solidify ourselves as like, oh yeah, we can do those formulas for you. We can make this process easier. Because right now, essentially, that's me and the ops person up to 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
That tech person, like right now, we have a few people. We call it the Strategic Projects and Operations Department, and their entire idea of their week and their months and their quarters are about moving rocks in EOS along from a technology perspective, and also identifying things that could really benefit from opening up a lot of capacity. So things like payroll benefit reconciliation sheets, planning sheets, pricing sheets. There's like all the stuff that you don't want to spend a lot of time on and that should be done by a computer. Introducing that would be great. Now, I would love for them to be introduced at like the 7 or 10 person mark, but like that is a true cost, and you typically won't see the savings from their work at that level versus the increased revenue from adding someone who's billable,
Right.
per se. So
Okay. Let me check one question at you and then we can wrap. When I bought my firm, it was about 35 people and it was accountants all the way down. And I suspect there's a lot of people listening who are like, you're talking about a lot of non-accountant folks and peripheral stuff where, especially in the traditional billable hour model, like that stuff just gets thrown by the wayside, I think. If you're in my shoes, if you're my coach 5 or 6 years ago and I'm sitting on like a 40-person firm and everyone's accountants, what's that first like non-accountant, non-technical, maybe not non-technical, but what's that first, I don't know, non-traditional person that you'd pull in?
I think it's the operations person. It's the one that goes around and talks to everybody and tries to find the commonality between all the roles and the opportunities and risks. What do you think?
I'll be honest, I never hired one of those folks and said, go figure this out, because I was perpetually a know-it-all in that regard. It was more like, I have very clear thoughts on what I think we need to be doing. And when I hired the person like that, it was more like to implement. It was more like to execute on sort of the plan that had already been created. It wasn't to sit down and have conversations that are going to look very different than the conversations you have with your boss to like suss out what's the right way to get through that.
Our most powerful people are the ones that are not the owners. And those ops types of people have looked there's been different types of roles over the years, but info gathering and looking at it from a fresh set of eyes has always helped. And honestly, if the owners are doing all of that, Could you imagine what they could also be thinking about with that free time other than this? And like, who cares? Honestly, who cares if you get it wrong the first time? Like everybody's
Yeah.
operations and stack and the way you do things, it evolves probably in cycles of every 12 to 16 months. So just start. Like that just feels like the right move.
Agreed. Okay, Chad, we touched earlier on Automation Town.
Oh, the old pod.
You're bringing it back from the grave, I hear.
Well, yes. Thank you for letting me use the Automation Town name. Starting August 6th of 2024, Automation Town is being revived as an automation and AI community for every accountant. So think networking, tech support, video libraries of how to connect a bunch of your accounting tools together, seeing what other people are building. And it's really fun because I asked 8 people who have service companies to accountants in the automation world. And they're like, absolutely, I'd love to be involved in the launch event. So for the first 8 weeks, starting from August 6th, one a week, you'll have, all the players in the automation world in Canada and the US, I guess, who will be speaking about what they're building for accountants. It'll all be recorded, and registration will open probably in the next 24 hours or so for it. So I'm super excited about it.
Is this for like the dedicated automation hire in your office, or just like whoever in your office is like geeking on this stuff and wants to steal ideas from other people?
The second. I think it's all about geeking. Like we all have our different sources of inspiration, and sometimes it's hard to get the details off of social media. So this is that little heavier lift where you can come in, and I think the pricing's pretty fun. Like I'm trying to keep it low. So the first 50 people, it's like $25 a month forever. And then like, it'll just be a little bit higher for the rest. But I'd like this to be a place where people have a little bit of skin in the game. It's not a free Facebook community, but it's there. Yeah. It's there so that when they do show up, there's some expectation of like, hey, you can put up your tech support question and interact with people and see how they would work. That's what I'm kind of excited about.
I'll put a link to that down in the show notes. Launch events happening within a week of this podcast going out. Excited to see how that develops. Chad, thank you for coming and doing this today.
Big hugs. Thanks, Jason.
Big hugs. Catch you in the next one.